I call this workout an upper body and core orchestra because it's so many movements just flowing together. We're doing a lot of core here with some rotations, focusing on our posture, and it's not your typical strength training workout that you're used to doing. So I'm going to take you through the whole entire thing for this upper body somatic workout. Starting off with some bent over rows where I'm pulling to the hip. The first 5 reps of this movement, I'm going to keep a really stable core where I am parallel with the ground and I'm not rotating my core at all. The next 5 reps, I'm doing a reach row where I'm reaching down towards the ground and then ending with a stable core parallel to the ground. And then I end this row circuit with a reach to a rotation row. So reaching down towards the ground and then rotating at the top. So I'm doing all 3 of those movements in one set. Then we go on to some high rows where I'm starting off with some stable core high rows, going into some reach high rows, again, keeping that same pattern of stable, reach, and then full rotation. So after 5 reps of each of those, I'm going into a reach and then rotation row. So merging all of those together in one circuit to get a different feel for all the different parts of the movement when you do all 3 types of those rows. After that, we're doing some flies where I'm keeping a really stable core at first. So just flying, using that rear shoulder blade to work those rear delts, then going into a rotation fly. This version of the fly mainly focuses on your core doing the twisting and not your rear shoulder. After doing all 3 of those bent over movements, we're going to do the same type of rows just in a hinged position here. So I'm starting off with double rows where I'm doing both of my arms together and then moving on into single arm rows where I do each arm individually, and then I go into alternating. So I do about 5 to 8 reps of each variation, double, single arm, and alternating. Once I do all 3 of those, I then go into alternating rows to the hip with a rotation. I do single arm first, and then I move into alternating. And what's really important about these row movements, and especially being hinged over, is keeping a really strong core and keeping that rib cage close to your pelvis and making sure that you're hinging at your hips. Now we're doing the high row variation where I'm doing both my arms together to start this circuit, doing about 5 to 8 reps together, then moving on to single arm, keeping that really strong, stable core, doing about 5 reps of each, and then I move into alternating with that high row. And my goal with this circuit and combining all variations of that is to really just wear those muscles out. So then we got to add in that rotation. So keeping a really strong core, turning at our core, and making this a really strong upper and core movement now. So I did alternating at first for that, and then I move into single arm high row rotations, making sure I'm doing all the doubles, the singles, and all of the alternating in all of these movements. After doing all of those hinged rows, we're now doing all of those rows in the standing position. So we're doing that high row, and this turns into a more upright row. I started off the set doing about 5 to 8 reps of double, doing them together. Then I moved into single arm, and then I go into alternating again. What I really want to emphasize in these standing variations is my pelvis and rib placement. So rib cage is closed, facing downward towards my hips. My pelvis is in a neutral position, and I'm standing completely upright. There is no hinge. So after we do those regular upright rows, we're then moving into the rotation row. So keep that rib cage closed and above your hips while you're in these rotations. I started out with single arm first, hitting those both for about 5 reps, and then I go into alternating for this movement as well. But really important is keeping your posture in this movement. Keep those hips nice and strong, that rib cage aligned with your hips, and really turn your core when you're doing those rotations and control your movement. So now we're doing the standing low row, so pulling towards our hips, and again, keep that rib cage closed and that pelvis really neutral. If you're using a heavier weight, you're going to be tempted to break your form here, but again, just keep that core really nice and engaged. So I did double here, and then I did alternating, and then I went into single arm. I kind of mixed up my pattern when I did alternating and single arm, but it doesn't really matter. So of course we do the rotation again, Pay attention to those hips, keeping them aligned with your ribs, and really focus on the upper core, doing the turning and rotating here. Your core is going to burn from this. So for every movement, I do just a simple keeping a stable core, and I do the rotations. And we keep that same theme of double, single arm, and alternating. And what I'm doing right here is I just want to show you my pelvis placement in my rib cage. Like, there is no hinge in my hips. Everything is straight up and down if you drew a line up my body. Then I did the standing fly. So again, I'm starting out with double here, pelvis straight up and down. Draw that line down my body. Then I moved into alternating. We're holding this ISO 90-degree bicep hold right now, which makes it really difficult. So you can stop and take breaks between your double, alternating, and single arm, because I did all three of those too. Now I'm doing the single arm, standing really strong and stable with my core. And yes, you better believe that we did a rotation with this as well. I started out doing alternating rotation, so keeping that pelvis really neutral and aligned with my rib cage, core engaged, twisting at the top part of my core. And then I went into doing single arm for this, focusing on the same side, coming back to that center point, holding that 90-degree ISO at your bicep, and doing each side for about 5 reps or until you burn out. Also important to note is that your face follows your chest to keep your spine really aligned. Now we're getting into some seated variations. So we want to keep that same pelvis and rib placement in these seated positions. So I like to sit on the bench and elongate my spine as I'm seated instead of compressing. And this is something you mentally have to focus on. So right here, I'm doing lateral raises. I started out doing double lateral raises, and then I moved into alternating lateral raises, and then I did single arm lateral raises. And right here, I'm doing ISO hold single arm lateral raises, where I hold one arm in the air and then I do reps on the other arm. Then I did some seated bicep curl push-outs. So keeping the really strong, stable core here, pelvis aligned with rib cage, core contracted and engaged. And then after I did those curl push-outs together, I moved into alternating and single arm of these bicep push-outs. So keeping that same theme of doing them together and then doing single arm and then doing alternating. And right here, I'm actually just doing an ISO hold at the end of that set to just really burn those biceps out. I like adding in ISO holds because it makes you learn to have to relax and quiet yourself in the movement to hold it for as long as you can. And I always bring it down really slow. Then of course, we got to add our rotation in. So we're doing alternating push out with a rotation, and we're doing single arm push out with a rotation as well. So again, doing about 5 to 8 reps of each to really burn everything out and really push your body past its comfort zone. And as you can see here with all of the rotation movements, my face follows my chest. And now we're doing lying chest fly. So for this, I want you to have your spine flush to the bench, which means you're gonna have to align your pelvis by slightly turning it downward. Bring your rib cage down so that your hips and your ribs are aligned, and I want you to pull that spine down to the bench and pull your belly button to your back. For this chest fly, I obviously did double, I did alternating, and I did single arm here to really burn it out and just go all out with that movement. But most importantly, keep that spine pulled down to the bench to really engage your core. And then we followed that with some seated tricep extensions, doing the double and the single arm and the alternating. But the main focus here when you're in a seated position is not rotating that rib cage open, and instead keeping it pointed downward at your hips like we have this entire workout, to keep that inner core really engaged and make sure that your spine is completely aligned and we're not compressing it in any way. And when you're seated, you could easily sit down into your hips, but you don't realize how much you compress your spine when you do that. So anytime you're seated, keep that spine elongated. And then I ended this workout with a pretty challenging movement, which is a high pull rotation to a press. If you can't do this movement because you just don't have the mobility to be able to get that press part, that's okay. But if you are doing this movement, we want to focus on making sure we keep that rib cage pointed down towards our hips. So keeping that really deep inner core engaged in order to do that, so that we don't extend our spine, and instead we're keeping it really neutral neutral with our hips all the way into this rotation. And that completes this workout. There was a lot of movements in this workout, so the full flow is written in the description below, and I hope you enjoy it.